2022 CrossFit Games is done and dusted. What we're going to look at today is the programming. Whether it was good enough, whether it lived up to Dave Castro's standards, or it crashed and burned. We're going to look at who actually won the games and how the games played out, my favorite and least favorite events, and then my overall thoughts about the CrossFit Games. This is the 2022 CrossFit Games review, and it starts now. As for the events themselves, that was also probably one of my favorite parts. A lot of people were kind of unsure coming into this year's CrossFit Games whether Adrian Bosman would be able to provide the caliber of events that Dave Castro was able to put out. And I believe that he definitely did. Day one of competition definitely did not reflect the potential of the events coming in day 2, 3, 4, and 5. Day one had a mishap straight off the bat with Spencer Panchek deciding that it was too mainstream to finish all of the workouts rounds.
Loose gravel and you got wet grass. No, that's not right. That's not right.
This has got to be a mistake for Spencer Panchik. He's running across the finish line. Jukic is going to turn around. There is some confusion here.
There's no way.
By cutting one short and going in early. It was one of my favorite commentary moments at the CrossFit Games. Oh no, that's just not right. Poor man got a bit confused with what lap he was on, but he thought, you know what, you can't beat him, cheat him. And then we had the infamous crossover double under event, which probably gave a few people at affiliates a fright of a new movement that they need to work on. If double unders weren't hard enough, these were even harder. They did look a little bit ridiculous. They were a skill. It is part of CrossFit, and I don't really mind the event itself, but it was my least favorite event of the entire weekend, purely because I didn't believe it gave enough competitive advantage. It didn't give you that like, oh my god, I can't believe he's winning kind of motion. Like, you didn't really care who fucking won or not. It was like, yeah, cool. Like, this is just a weird fucking workout that I'm watching. Apart from those two mishappy, shaky events, overall, the rest of the CrossFit Games events were absolutely excellent. Like, there was too many to pick from that I really enjoyed watching. My number one event, we'll just go straight to it, was the Sandbag Ladder. How intense was that? Watching them lift those sandbags, which at some points were taking between 20 and 30 seconds to achieve a repetition. There was a bunch of them going at once, so it wasn't like we were just watching one person at a time fail a lift. And then even the tiebreaker was intense. When it got to the actual tiebreaker, you were like, damn, who's gonna win? You never knew. And it finished so well for the men. The men had probably one of the best competitions just in the recent years. But that event finish was incredible. Two people, Nick Matthews and Guia, both got the same freaking score. When does that ever happen? That is insane. Other notable events that I really enjoyed, the Capital. I believe that was an excellent chipper endurance-based event, finishing off with that coffin sandbag at the end. Yes, Ricky took the win on that one. And Haley Adams was leading by an extensive margin, but it did show that, like, if you weren't strategizing this one well enough, it could bite you in the ass right at the end, which is what it did to her. Other amazing events that I believe that I would love to do if I had the equipment, because it's very specific equipment, is something like hat trick with the high wall balls and dumbbell squat snatches. That kind of sprint race gave you a bit more intensity. And then something like the alpaca that I found really interesting was with the increasing load on the sled as the workout progressed. You had awesome workouts like Jackie Pro, adding a bit of a twist to the current level of Jackie. Elizabeth Elevated, which is a harder version of Elizabeth with those poles, whatever they're called, the gymnastic poles. So many good events, so many good moments this weekend. It is really hard to cover it all without going into like an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour explanation of it. So keeping it short, keeping it simple. I believe this was one of the better CrossFit Games, and I'm even going to put it up against something like the 2018 CrossFit Games, which is, in my opinion, the gold standard for games program. There was a lot of anticipation leading up to the 2022 CrossFit Games, especially around the athletes themselves and the way that the CrossFit media team led on the community to create this picture in their head of what the games was going to look like. We had tons of footage from Mal O'Brien saying that she was going to be the Tier killer, the one that was going to defeat Tier and take her throne. We had Ricky's and Roman Krenikov's redemption story. Ricky coming back after a 4-year drug ban. Roman Krenikov not being able to compete at the games for 4 years due to visa issues. We had the previous reigning champion, Justin Medeiros, and whether he would hold on to his title as the fittest man on earth. And then I'm sure you are just as annoyed as I am about the Reykjavik versus Mayhem battle that they forced upon us this year by the CrossFit media team. Look, I understand the team competition did need some villains. They did need some people who were going to go after the crown, but they didn't need to push it down our throats that much. Nevertheless, it was the setup for this year's CrossFit Games. Of course, then we had a bunch of the young guns, the Guiers, the Emma Lawsons. We also obviously had Mal O'Brien, Haley Adams, all of these athletes, Dallin Pepper. They're up-and-comers that they thought were going to perform well in the sport of CrossFit, and they definitely idolize these people to beat the best at the sport. So, did that or did that not happen? For the majority of the weekend, and at even one point, Emma Lawson held the leader's jersey off the reigning fittest woman on earth, Tia Claire Toomey. So even though, yes, she was pretty hyped up to be some awesome athlete, she actually performed when it came to the big stage. Almost towards the end of the weekend, she was going to see that podium position, but the last couple of events just didn't go her way and probably weren't her strengths, but she still came 6th overall nevertheless. Mal O'Brien did live up to the expectations that she was pushing out, being coached by Matt Fraser. Yeah, she didn't beat Tia Claire Toomey, but she comfortably took 2nd, which will set her up for the future, whether Tia will continue or not. And going into the next couple of years, she's going to be incredibly hard to beat as she gets older. We saw similar likes from someone like Katrin David's daughter when she was 19, 20 years old, and she won the CrossFit Games 2 years in a row. This is the kind of same pattern that looking like it's going to come from someone like Mal O'Brien. Obviously, old news, but Tia's the 6-time reigning champion. As much as it's awesome and it's a great thing, we almost expected it to happen. But probably one of the most brilliant things that I believe this year's documentary is going to run over is the fact that Tia Claire Toomey did it after training for bobsledding, losing tons of weight, and not doing CrossFit for a very long period of time, almost up to the open, and then had the ability to come back and clean sweep that CrossFit Games with a little bit of a shaky start in that first day. Looking over the men and all eyes on Ricky Gerard on his return to the CrossFit Games. Of course, he did not disappoint with plenty of event wins and great finishes in the CrossFit Games itself. He was holding on to the leader's jersey for a reasonable amount of time this weekend, and he was also at a point where he was starting to get a good point lead over Justin Medeiros. But the consistency king Justin, as he is, just kept on doing well at events, and Ricky had his on and off event that did cause him to fall out of contention for that top spot, but nevertheless he took 3rd place. Roman Krenikov, as I mentioned, hasn't been able to compete at the CrossFit Games because of his visa issues, took 2nd overall in his rookie appearance, that first time at the Games. Justin, the reigning champion, and couldn't be happier for him to win again. That rounds up our top 3 men. Some of the names that you didn't really hear about much this weekend was Pat Vellner, someone like Brent Fikowski. These guys, they did okay. They didn't do well. They were around the top spot, but then they weren't. Brent Fikowski was unfortunately getting smashed by these events that obviously weren't to his strengths, where he did really well at something like the Granite Games. The Games itself wasn't as programmed well for him. Do I even need to cover the team competition? CrossFit Mayhem win again. They won like 7 events in a row. Disgusting. What are your thoughts on the CrossFit Games? What was your favorite and least favorite moment? Leave it in the comments down below. As always, subscribe to the channel for more content. Check out my website and all my social medias, and I hope you guys are home. Stay a beast.